I stood frozen in my living room, watching my husband Derek and his best friend Brandon laugh like they were sharing the world's funniest joke. The birthday decorations I had hung that morning suddenly felt like they were mocking me. Pink and gold streamers twisted above our heads, while 20 of our closest friends and family members chatted around the coffee table, completely unaware that my entire world was about to shatter. "This is the perfect moment," Brandon said, his eyes gleaming with something that made my stomach turn. He clapped Derek on the shoulder like they were celebrating a touchdown instead of destroying an 8-year marriage. "It's her birthday. She'll remember it." Derek nodded, his face serious now, but I could see the excitement underneath. The same look he used to get when he surprised me with weekend trips or anniversary gifts. Except this time, the surprise was going to ruin me, or so he thought. "You're absolutely right," Derek said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "So, will you?" The envelope was crisp and white, like something you'd use for wedding invitations. How fitting. Derek walked toward me with Brandon right behind him, both wearing expressions that tried to look sympathetic but couldn't hide their satisfaction. My mother Helen was sitting on the couch nearby, and I saw her face change as she sensed something was wrong. "Anna," Derek said, his voice carrying that fake gentle tone he used when he was about to deliver bad news. "Brandon and I have something for you." I looked at the envelope in his outstretched hand, then at Brandon's smirking face, then back at Derek. Around us, conversations were starting to quiet down as people noticed the strange tension in the room. My 6-year-old son Tommy was playing with his toy cars in the corner, completely innocent of what was happening. "What is it?" I asked, though I already knew. I had known for weeks what was coming. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way Derek had started looking at me like I was a stranger in my own home, but knowing something is coming and experiencing it are two very different things. "Just open it," Brandon said, and there was something cruel in his voice that I had never heard before. This man had been in our wedding party. He had held Tommy when he was a baby. He had eaten dinner at our table hundreds of times, and now he was standing in my living room, enjoying my humiliation. I took the envelope with steady hands. Even though my heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. The paper felt heavy, official. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out, with Derek's signature at the bottom. All they needed was mine. "Happy birthday, Anna," Derek said, and I could hear the relief in his voice, like he had been carrying a heavy weight and was finally setting it down. I think it's time we both moved on. The room had gone completely silent now. I could feel everyone staring at us, could sense my mother starting to stand up from the couch. Someone's wine glass clinked against the coffee table. Tommy's toy car made a small vrooming sound as he pushed it across the hardwood floor. I looked down at the papers again, reading the words that would legally end my marriage. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets, custody arrangements. Everything neat and tidy, like Derek had been planning this for months, which I realized he probably had been. "You want me to sign these now?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "At my birthday party? In front of everyone?" "We thought it would be easier this way," Brandon said, stepping closer. "Clean break, no drama, you can start fresh." Start fresh. Like 8 years of marriage was just something you could throw away and start over. Like Tommy didn't exist. Like the house we had bought together, the dreams we had shared, the life we had built meant nothing at all. I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me, my coworkers from the marketing firm, Derek's colleagues, our neighbors. People who had watched us grow up together, who had celebrated our wedding, who had brought casseroles when Tommy was born. They were all witnessing this moment, this perfect moment that Derek and Brandon had chosen so carefully. "You're right," I said finally, setting the papers down on the coffee table. "I will remember this birthday." I walked to the hall closet and pulled out a small wrapped box I had hidden behind the winter coats. It was about the size of a jewelry box, wrapped in silver paper with a white ribbon. I had been saving it for the right moment, and apparently, that moment was now. "Before I sign anything," I said, walking back to where Derek and Brandon stood, "I have a gift for both of you. Don't open it too late." Derek looked confused, but Brandon's expression had shifted slightly. Maybe he was starting to realize that I wasn't reacting the way they had expected. Maybe he was beginning to understand that a woman who stays calm when her husband serves her divorce papers at her own birthday party might have a few surprises of her own. I handed Derek the box, then picked up a pen from the coffee table. Without another word, I signed the divorce papers, my signature neat and clear at the bottom of the page. The room was so quiet I could hear the pen scratching against the paper. "There," I said, straightening up and smoothing down my dress. "All done." Derek was holding the wrapped box like it might explode. Brandon was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Around us, our guests were frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay or pretend this wasn't happening. I picked up my purse from the side table and walked toward the front door. At the threshold, I turned back one last time to look at Derek and Brandon, still standing there with their divorce papers and their mysterious gift. "Enjoy the rest of the party," I said. "And Derek, happy birthday to me." Then I walked out of my own birthday party, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and two men who had no idea what they had just unleashed. 6 months earlier, I was folding Derek's laundry when I found the receipt. It was crumpled in his jeans pocket, from a restaurant I had never heard of. Chez Laurent. Dinner for two. $87. The date was last Tuesday, when Derek had told me he was working late on the Morrison account. I stood in our bedroom, holding that small piece of paper, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Derek never took clients to fancy restaurants. He always said it was a waste of company money. But here was proof that he had spent almost $90 on dinner for two people, and I definitely wasn't one of them. I could have confronted him right then, could have marched downstairs where he was watching television and demanded an explanation, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he had been acting lately. Distant, distracted, always checking his phone and turning the screen away when I walked by. Instead, I put the receipt in my jewelry box and decided to pay attention. The signs had been there for weeks, I realized. Derek coming home later and later from work, taking phone calls in the garage, showering as soon as he got home, even on days when he claimed he had been sitting at a desk all day. The way he had stopped really looking at me when we talked, like his mind was always somewhere else. And then there was Claire. Claire had been my best friend since college. We had been roommates for 3 years, bridesmaids in each other's weddings, godmothers to each other's children. She knew everything about me, and I thought I knew everything about her. But lately, our weekly coffee dates had become monthly, then stopped altogether. She always had excuses. Work was busy. She was dating someone new but didn't want to talk about it yet. She needed some space to figure things out. I had been hurt by her distance, but I hadn't been suspicious. Not until I started paying attention to Derek's behavior and realized that Claire's withdrawal had started around the same time. The next Tuesday, I told Derek I was going to book club and instead parked across the street from his office building. I felt ridiculous sitting there in my car, like some kind of private detective from a bad movie. But at 6:30, when Derek usually got home, I watched him walk out of the building with Claire. They weren't touching, weren't obviously together, but there was something about the way they moved that made my chest tight. They walked to Derek's car, and Claire got in the passenger seat. The same seat where I sat every Sunday when we drove to church as a family. I followed them to Chez Laurent. Through the restaurant window, I watched my husband and my best friend share a bottle of wine. I watched Derek reach across the table and touch Claire's hand. I watched Claire laugh at something he said, the same laugh I had heard 1,000 times during our college years. I watched them look at each other the way Derek and I used to look at each other, back when we were young and everything felt possible. I sat in my car in that parking lot for 2 hours, watching my marriage end through a restaurant window. When I got home, Derek was already there, sitting on the couch in his work clothes. "How was book club?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "Good," I said. "We discussed betrayal in modern literature." He didn't even catch the irony. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I checked our phone records and found hundreds of texts between Derek and Claire. I looked at our credit card statements and found charges at hotels, restaurants, even a jewelry store. I discovered that Derek had been telling Claire things about our marriage, our problems, our most private moments. The worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was reading their messages and realizing how long they had been planning this, how they talked about me like I was an obstacle to overcome rather than a person with feelings. How they discussed the best way to handle the Anna situation like I was a problem to be solved. Claire knew about Tommy's nightmares and how I stayed up with him. She knew about my mother's health scare and how worried I had been. She knew about the promotion I had been hoping for at work. And she was using all of that information to help Derek figure out the perfect time to leave me. But the thing that really broke my heart was finding out about Brandon's involvement. Derek's best friend since high school had been covering for him from the beginning. Brandon's apartment was where Derek and Claire met when they couldn't risk being seen in public. Brandon's credit card was used to book hotel rooms. Brandon had even called me directly to provide alibis, telling me elaborate stories about Derek helping him with home repairs or work projects. I remembered the night 3 weeks ago when Derek said he was helping Brandon install a new bathroom. I had even packed Derek a sandwich and sent him off with a thermos of coffee, worried that he would get hungry while doing manual labor for his friend. The whole time, Derek and Claire were probably laughing about how gullible I was. Brandon had looked me in the eye at Tommy's 6th birthday party and asked how Derek was handling the stress at work. He had hugged me at Christmas and told me how lucky Derek was to have such a wonderful wife. He had been lying to my face for months, helping my husband destroy our family. That night, I called my old friend Carlos, who had become a divorce lawyer after law school. I told him I needed to understand my options, but I wasn't ready to file anything yet. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to protect Tommy and myself. "Take your time," Carlos said, "but Anna, document everything. You're going to need it." So I did. I started building a case against my own husband, gathering evidence of his betrayal while pretending everything was normal, and slowly, a plan began to form. Carlos met me at a small coffee shop downtown, far from our neighborhood where someone might recognize us. He looked older than I remembered from college, more serious in his dark suit and wire-rimmed glasses. But his smile was the same when he saw me walk in. "Anna," he said, standing to hug me. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." I sat across from him in the corner booth, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup I didn't really want. I need to know what I'm looking at legally. If Derek files for divorce, what happens to Tommy? To the house? To everything we've built? Carlos pulled out a yellow legal pad and clicked his pen. "Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Don't leave out details because you think they're embarrassing or unimportant." So I told him about the restaurant receipt, about following Derek and Claire, about the text messages and credit card charges. I told him about Brandon's lies and cover-ups. Carlos took notes, asking questions that made me realize how much evidence I had already gathered without even trying. "The affair itself isn't going to matter much in court," Carlos explained. "Texas is a no-fault divorce state, but if Derek has been using marital assets to fund this relationship, that's different. That's dissipation of marital property." "What does that mean?" "It means if he's been spending your joint money on hotels, dinners, gifts for Claire, the court can make him pay that back." "How much are we talking about?" I pulled out the folder I had been keeping, filled with printed credit card statements and bank records. "I've tracked about $15,000 over the past 6 months. Hotels, restaurants, jewelry, even a weekend trip to Austin that he told me was for work." Carlos whistled low. "That's significant. What about your assets? House, savings, retirement accounts?" "The house is in both our names. We have about $40,000 in savings, and Derek has a $401K through his company. I have my own retirement account from work." I paused, then added, "But Carlos, there's something else. I think Derek might be stealing from his company." Carlos looked up from his notes. "What makes you think that?" I had been dreading this conversation, but I knew I had to tell someone. Derek works in accounts payable for a construction company. He processes payments to contractors and suppliers, but I've been looking at our bank account, and there are deposits that don't match his salary. Small amounts, usually under $1,000, but they happen every few weeks. "How long has this been going on?" "At least a year, maybe longer." I never paid attention before because Derek handles most of our finances, but when I started looking closer, I noticed the pattern. Carlos was writing furiously now. "Do you have any proof of this?" Bank statements showing the deposits, and I found some paperwork in Derek's home office. Invoices from contractors I've never heard of, but the payments are going to an account that Derek controls. Anna, if Derek is embezzling from his employer, that changes everything. That's a felony. It could mean prison time. The weight of what I was saying hit me then. I wasn't just talking about divorce anymore. I was talking about destroying Derek's entire life. But then I thought about him laughing with Brandon at my birthday party, about the cruel timing they had chosen, about the months of lies and betrayal. "There's more," I said quietly. "I think Brandon is involved." I told Carlos about the fake invoices I had found, how some of them were for Brandon's landscaping business, how Brandon had been receiving payments for work that was never done, then probably splitting the money with Derek. "So we're looking at a conspiracy," Carlos said. "Derek steals from his company, funnels some of the money to Brandon through fake contracts, and they split the profits. Meanwhile, Derek uses some of that stolen money to fund his affair with your best friend." When he put it like that, it sounded even worse than I had imagined. "What should I do?" I asked. Carlos leaned back in his chair, studying his notes. "First, we need more evidence. Can you access Derek's computer or email? He leaves his laptop open sometimes when he's in the shower. I know his password. Get me copies of everything. Emails, financial records, anything that shows the pattern of theft. But be careful. If Derek realizes you're investigating him, he might destroy evidence or move money where you can't find it." "What about Tommy?" "With Derek potentially facing criminal charges, custody shouldn't be a problem. Courts don't like to give custody to convicted felons, but we need to be strategic about timing." Carlos explained that I should continue gathering evidence while acting normal at home. He would start preparing divorce papers, but wouldn't file them until we had everything we needed. He also suggested I open my own bank account and start moving money there, just in case Derek tried to empty their joint accounts. "How long do I have to keep pretending?" I asked. "As long as it takes to build an airtight case. Derek and Brandon think they're so smart, but they're about to learn that stealing money leaves a paper trail. And Anna, when this is over, you're going to be in a much better position than they are." I left the coffee shop feeling something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Derek and Brandon thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. They had no idea that I was actually playing an entirely different game, one where I knew all their moves before they made them. That night, while Derek was in the shower, I copied every file from his laptop onto a flash drive. I was no longer just a betrayed wife, gathering evidence of an affair. I was building a case that would send my husband and his best friend to prison. I was washing dishes when I heard Derek's phone ring in the living room. He was upstairs putting Tommy to bed, reading him the same dinosaur book for the 100th time. The phone kept ringing, and after a moment, I heard Derek's footsteps on the stairs. "Brandon, hey," Derek said, his voice carrying from the living room. "Yeah, she's in the kitchen. Hold on." I heard him walk toward the back of the house, probably heading to his home office. But our house was old, and sound traveled through the heating vents in strange ways. If I stood near the kitchen vent, I could hear almost everything said in Derek's office. I turned off the water and moved closer to the vent, my heart pounding. "Okay, I can talk now," Derek said. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about the timeline." Brandon's voice came through clearly. "When are you going to tell her?" "Soon. I'm just waiting for the right moment." "Dude, you've been saying that for weeks. Claire is getting impatient. She wants to know when you two can stop sneaking around." There was a pause, then Derek said, "I know, it's just, Anna's birthday is coming up next week. Maybe I should wait until after that." "Are you kidding me?" Brandon laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. Her birthday would be perfect. Think about it. She'll be surrounded by people, so she can't make a huge scene, and it's memorable. She'll never forget the day you finally grew a pair and left her. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. "That seems kind of cruel," Derek said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "Cruel? Derek, you've been miserable for years. Anna's been holding you back from the life you really want, and now you have Claire, who actually gets you. Who supports your dreams instead of questioning every decision you make?" "You're right," Derek said slowly. "Anna does question everything. Remember when I wanted to start that consulting business? She shot it down immediately." I remembered that conversation differently. Derek had wanted to quit his job and start a business with no plan, no savings, and no clients. I had suggested he keep his job and build the business on the side first. Apparently, that made me unsupportive. Exactly, Brandon said. Claire would never do that. She believes in you. And think about it. If you serve her the papers at her birthday party, with everyone watching, she'll be too shocked and embarrassed to fight back. She'll probably just sign them right there. You think so? I know so. Women like Anna, they care too much about what other people think. She won't want to cause a scene in front of her family and friends. She'll take it quietly, and then you can move on with your life. Derek was quiet for a moment, then said, "What about the money situation? Have you moved everything we discussed?" "Most of it. I've got about $20,000 in the account we set up. That should be enough to get you and Claire started somewhere new. Maybe California. Like you talked about, $20,000. They had stolen $20,000 from Derek's company, and I had only found evidence of 15. They were better at hiding it than I thought." "Good," Derek said. "And you're sure there's no way this traces back to us?" "Derek, I've been doing this for over a year. The invoices look completely legitimate. As far as anyone knows, my company did landscaping work for Morrison Construction, and you processed the payments like you're supposed to. There's no way anyone connects the dots. What if Anna gets suspicious during the divorce? What if she starts looking at our finances?" Brandon laughed again. "Anna? Come on, she barely pays attention to money stuff now. You think she's suddenly going to become a forensic accountant? Besides, by the time she figures out anything is missing, you'll be long gone." "You're right," Derek said. "Okay, let's do it. Next Saturday at her birthday party. I'll have the papers ready." "Perfect. And Derek, this is the right thing. You deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who appreciates you." "Thanks, man. I don't know what I would have done without you through all this." "That's what friends are for. Now go practice your speech. Make it sound like you're doing this for both of you, like it's the mature thing to do." I heard Derek's chair creak, which meant he was getting up. I quickly moved away from the vent and turned the water back on, grabbing a plate to wash. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway a few minutes later. "Tommy's asleep," he said. "Who was on the phone?" "Brandon," Derek said casually. "Just checking in about the weekend." "What's happening this weekend?" "Nothing special. Guy stuff." I nodded and kept washing dishes, even though my mind was racing. They were planning to humiliate me at my own birthday party. They thought I was too weak, too concerned about appearances to fight back. They thought I would just quietly sign away 8 years of marriage because I wouldn't want to make a scene. But the worst part was hearing how they talked about me, like I was some kind of burden Derek had been carrying. Like our entire marriage had been a mistake he was finally correcting. "Anna?" Derek said. "You okay? You seem quiet tonight." I turned to look at him. This man I had loved for so long, who was planning to destroy me in the cruelest way possible. "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking about my birthday party. I have a feeling it's going to be unforgettable." Derek smiled, completely missing the edge in my voice. "I'm sure it will be. If only he knew how right he was." The week before my birthday felt like the longest 7 days of my life. Every morning I woke up knowing that Derek was counting down to what he thought would be my destruction, while I was counting down to his. I took a personal day on Monday and drove to 3 different banks, opening accounts that Derek knew nothing about. Carlos had advised me to move money gradually, small amounts that wouldn't trigger any alerts. 500 here, 1,000 there. By Wednesday, I had moved $12,000 from our joint savings into accounts that only I could access. Derek didn't notice. He was too busy planning my humiliation with Brandon and Claire. Tuesday evening, while Derek was at what he claimed was a work dinner, I sat in his office with his laptop open, copying files onto multiple flash drives. Bank records, email correspondence, fake invoices, everything Carlos would need to prove the embezzlement scheme. My hands moved quickly across the keyboard, but my mind kept drifting to the conversation I had overheard. "She barely pays attention to money stuff," Brandon had said. They really thought I was that naive. I found emails between Derek and Brandon dating back 14 months, discussing which contractors to create fake invoices for and how much money they could safely steal without raising suspicion. They had a whole system worked out. Brandon would submit invoices for landscaping work that was never done, Derek would approve the payments, and they would split the money 60-40, with Derek taking the larger share since he was taking the bigger risk. But the emails also revealed something else. Derek had been planning to leave me long before Claire came into the picture. In one message from 8 months ago, Derek had written to Brandon, "I need to get out of this marriage, but I need money first. Anna will try to take everything in a divorce." So the affair wasn't the cause of our marriage ending, it was just Derek's exit strategy. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Derek's office building. I had never been inside Morrison Construction, but I knew Derek's boss, Mr. Peterson, from company Christmas parties. I told the receptionist I was Derek's wife and that I needed to speak with Mr. Peterson about a surprise party we were planning. Mr. Peterson was a kind man in his 60s who had always been friendly to me at company events. He welcomed me into his office with a warm smile. "Anna, how nice to see you. Derek's told me so much about your birthday coming up." I bet he had. "Actually, Mr. Peterson, I'm here about something else. I think Derek might be in some kind of trouble, and I'm worried about him." His expression changed immediately. "What kind of trouble?" I had rehearsed this conversation with Carlos. I needed to plant seeds of suspicion without directly accusing Derek of anything. "Not yet. I've noticed some strange deposits in our bank account," I said. "Money that doesn't match Derek's salary. When I ask him about it, he gets defensive and changes the subject. I'm worried he might be involved in something illegal." Mr. Peterson leaned forward, his face serious. "What kind of deposits?" "Usually under $1,000, but they happen every few weeks. Derek says it's overtime pay, but the amounts don't make sense." "Anna, I appreciate you coming to me with this. Can you give me some specific dates?" I pulled out a piece of paper with dates and amounts I had prepared. "These are just from the past 3 months." Mr. Peterson studied the list, then opened his computer. After a few minutes of typing, his face grew dark. "Anna, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you have any reason to believe Derek might be stealing from the company?" "Mannery," I let my face show the shock and pain I was actually feeling. I hope not. But Mr. Peterson, I found some invoices in Derek's home office from contractors I've never heard of. And one of them is from Brandon Miller's landscaping company, but Brandon has never done any work on our house." "Brandon Miller," Mr. Peterson repeated, writing down the name. "And he's Derek's friend? His best friend since high school." "Mr." Peterson was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Anna, I'm going to need to investigate this. In the meantime, I need you to not mention this conversation to Derek. Can you do that?" "Of course. I love my husband, Mr. Peterson. If he's in trouble, I want to help him." "I understand. And Anna, thank you for coming to me. I know this couldn't have been easy." I left Morrison Construction feeling like I had lit a fuse on a bomb. By the time Derek served me divorce papers at my birthday party, Mr. Peterson would already be investigating the embezzlement. Derek and Brandon had no idea what was coming. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of party preparations. I ordered a cake, bought decorations, sent invitations. Derek watched me plan my own birthday party, knowing he was going to destroy it, and he seemed almost excited. He kept asking if I needed help with anything, if I was sure I had invited enough people. "I want this to be a birthday you'll never forget," he said Friday night as we got ready for bed. "Don't worry," I replied, hanging up my dress for the party. "I'm sure it will be." Friday night, I wrapped Derek and Brandon's gift. Inside the small silver box, I placed a flash drive containing copies of all their emails, bank records, and fake invoices. I also included a note that simply said, "Surprise!" Saturday morning, Derek woke up humming. He made coffee and asked what time people were coming to the party. 2 o'clock, I said. "Perfect timing for what you have planned." He looked at me sharply, but I was already walking away, carrying my coffee and my secrets upstairs to get ready for the most important performance of my life. The party was in full swing by 2:30. My living room buzzed with conversation as friends and family balanced paper plates of cake and plastic cups of punch. My mother, Helen, was showing photos of Tommy's latest soccer game to my coworkers, while my neighbors discussed the new restaurant that had opened downtown. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy, completely unaware that they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years. I moved through the crowd with a smile plastered on my face, accepting birthday wishes and compliments on the decorations. But my eyes kept tracking Derek and Brandon, who stood near the kitchen doorway, checking their watches and exchanging meaningful looks. Derek had been nervous all morning, dropping his coffee cup at breakfast and forgetting to put on deodorant until I reminded him, but now he seemed focused, determined. He kept touching his jacket pocket where I knew the divorce papers were waiting. Brandon looked excited, like a kid about to pull off the perfect prank. He had arrived early, supposedly to help set up, but really to make sure everything went according to their plan. He had even brought a bottle of expensive champagne, which now seemed darkly appropriate. At exactly 3 o'clock, Derek caught Brandon's eye and nodded. This was it. "Anna," Derek called out, his voice cutting through the party chatter. "Could you come here for a minute?" The room began to quiet as people sensed something important was happening. I walked toward Derek and Brandon, my heart pounding but my face calm. Behind me, I could hear conversations trailing off as guests turned to watch. "What is it?" I asked, though I knew exactly what was coming. Derek's hand went to his jacket pocket, and Brandon stepped closer, that cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "This is the perfect moment," Brandon said, loud enough for several people to hear. His eyes were bright with anticipation. "It's her birthday. She'll remember it." Derek pulled out the white envelope, his hands steadier now that the moment had arrived. "You're right," he said, looking directly at me. "So will you?" The room had gone completely silent now. Even Tommy had stopped playing with his toys and was looking up at us with curious eyes. My mother had gone pale, her hand pressed to her chest as she began to understand what was happening. "Anna," Derek said, his voice carrying that fake, gentle tone I had come to hate. "Brandon and I have something for you." He held out the envelope, and I could see the satisfaction in both their faces. They thought they were so clever, so strategic. They had planned this moment down to the last detail, choosing the perfect time and place to destroy me. I took the envelope with steady hands, even though every person in the room was staring at me. The paper felt heavy, final. Inside were the divorce papers I had already seen Derek preparing, along with custody arrangements that heavily favored him and financial terms that would leave me with almost nothing. "Happy birthday, Anna," Derek said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "I think it's time we both moved on." Brandon was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Open it," he urged. "Don't keep everyone waiting." I looked down at the papers, reading the words that would legally end my marriage. Around me, I could hear people whispering, could feel the shock and embarrassment radiating from my guests. This was exactly what Derek and Brandon had wanted, a public humiliation that would leave me too stunned and mortified to fight back. "You want me to sign these now?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "At my birthday party? In front of everyone?" "We thought it would be easier this way," Brandon said, stepping even closer. "Clean break, no drama, you can start fresh." I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. My coworkers, Derek's colleagues, our neighbors, my family. They were all witnessing this moment, this perfect moment that Derek and Brandon had orchestrated so carefully. "You're right," I said finally, setting the papers down on the coffee table. "I will remember this birthday." I walked to the hall closet and retrieved the small wrapped box I had hidden there. Silver paper, white ribbon, perfectly innocent looking. I had been carrying this secret for days, waiting for exactly this moment. "Before I sign anything," I said, walking back to where Derek and Brandon stood, "I have a gift for both of you." Derek looked confused, but I could see something shifting in Brandon's expression. Maybe he was starting to realize that I wasn't reacting the way they had expected. Maybe he was beginning to understand that a woman who stays calm when her husband serves her divorce papers at her own birthday party might have a few surprises of her own. I handed Derek the box, then picked up a pen from the coffee table. Without another word, I signed the divorce papers. There, my signature, neat and clear at the bottom of the page. The room was so quiet, I could hear the pen scratching against the paper. "There," I said, straightening up and smoothing down my dress. "All done." Derek was holding the wrapped box like it might explode. Brandon was staring at me with an expression that had shifted from satisfaction to uncertainty. Around us, our guests were frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay or pretend this wasn't happening. "Well," I said, looking directly at both men, Aren't you going to open your gift? I worked very hard on it. Derek's hands were shaking slightly as he began to unwrap the silver paper. Brandon moved closer, trying to see what was inside. The entire room held its breath. Derek lifted the lid of the small box, and I watched his face change as he saw what was inside. Derek's face went completely white as he stared into the box. His hand started trembling so violently that Brandon had to steady the box to keep it from falling. Inside was a flash drive and a folded piece of paper with 2 words written in my neat handwriting. "Surprise, gentlemen!" "What is it?" Brandon whispered, but his voice carried in the silent room. Derek pulled out the note with shaking fingers and unfolded it. Underneath "Surprise, gentlemen," I had written, "Everything is on the drive." Bank records, emails, fake invoices, Morrison construction evidence. Mr. Peterson received copies yesterday. The FBI will have them Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Brandon snatched the note from Derek's hands, his face turning gray as he read. The expensive champagne bottle slipped from his other hand and shattered on the hardwood floor, sending glass and liquid across the room. "Anna," Derek said, his voice barely a whisper. "What have you done?" I picked up my purse from the side table, completely calm, while chaos erupted around me. "I gave you exactly what you gave me, Derek, a surprise you'll never forget." "You don't understand," Brandon said desperately. "We can explain everything. The money, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" I turned to face both men, and for the first time in months, I felt completely in control. "Because it looks like you've been stealing from Morrison Construction for over a year. It looks like you created fake invoices for Brandon's landscaping company and split the profits. It looks like you used that stolen money to fund your affair with Claire." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Derek's colleagues from Morrison Construction were staring at him in horror. My mother had tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of pride. "How much?" Derek asked, his voice hollow. $23,000 total. I found the account you thought you had hidden so well." I smiled at their shocked expressions. "You were right about one thing, Derek. I didn't pay attention to money before, but you gave me a very good reason to start learning." Brandon was frantically pulling out his phone. "I need to call my lawyer. This is entrapment or something. You can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted. "Everything I gave to Mr. Peterson and the FBI came from Derek's own computer and your email correspondence. You documented your own crimes, Brandon. I just made sure the right people saw the evidence." Derek sank into the nearest chair, the divorce papers scattered at his feet. "The FBI? Mr. Peterson contacted them Friday afternoon. Apparently, stealing from a company that has federal construction contracts makes it a federal crime. Who knew?" I shrugged like I was discussing the weather. "They'll probably want to talk to both of you first thing Monday morning." "Anna, please," Derek said, and for the first time in months, he was really looking at me. "We can work this out. The money, I can pay it back. We don't have to get divorced." I made a mistake, but— "A mistake?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Derek, you planned this for over a year. You stole money from your employer. You had an affair with my best friend. You convinced your best friend to help you destroy our marriage. And then you decided to serve me divorce papers at my own birthday party because you thought it would be funny to humiliate me in front of everyone I care about." I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at us. "Well, you were right about one thing. Everyone here will definitely remember this birthday." Tommy had started crying, confused by all the shouting and broken glass. My mother immediately went to him, picking him up and carrying him toward the kitchen, away from the chaos. "What about Tommy?" Derek asked desperately. "You can't keep my son from me." "Your son?" I raised an eyebrow. "Derek, you're about to be arrested for federal crimes. Family court judges tend to frown on that when making custody decisions. But don't worry, I'm sure Tommy can visit you in prison." Brandon was still frantically dialing his phone, but his hands were shaking so badly he kept hitting the wrong numbers. "This isn't over, Anna. We'll fight this. We'll prove you set us up." "With what evidence?" I asked. "Everything the FBI has came from your own emails and bank records. You set yourselves up. I just made sure someone was paying attention." Derek stood up slowly, looking around the room at all the people who now knew exactly what kind of man he was. His colleagues wouldn't meet his eyes. Our neighbors were whispering among themselves. Even the friends who had known him for years were staring at him like he was a stranger. "I need to go," he said quietly. "I need to call a lawyer." "Good idea," I said. "You're going to need a very good one." Derek and Brandon stumbled toward the front door, leaving behind the shattered champagne bottle, the scattered divorce papers, and the ruins of their perfect plan. As they reached the threshold, Derek turned back one last time. "Anna, happy birthday to me," I said, cutting him off. After they left, the room slowly came back to life. My guests began cleaning up the broken glass, throwing away the divorce papers, and asking if I was okay. But I felt better than I had in months. Carlos had been right. When this was over, I was going to be in a much better position than they were. Derek and Brandon thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. They had no idea I was actually playing an entirely different game. And I had just won!